David stood alone, the relic pulsing in his hands. Its surface glowed faintly, like a heartbeat deep within the stone. He had found it buried deep in the earth, hidden for centuries, and now it was more than just an object. It was the key to saving Earth. But David didn't know exactly how it worked. All he knew was that this relic held the power to change everything. The invaders had thought Earth was weak, that humanity could be wiped out without a fight. But now David felt it. Earth had power, power the aliens could never have imagined. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He could feel the ground beneath him, the vibrations of the Earth's core deep below, like a low hum. The relic seemed to respond, its energy flowing into him. He held it tighter, trying to control the surge of power. It was overwhelming, like the planet itself was alive, watching, waiting. The first surge. The air around him began to crackle. David's heart raced, and his palms began to sweat. He had read about the Earth's hidden power. The storms, the earthquakes, the raging forces of nature that no army could stand against. But he hadn't expected this. The power surged through him like a tidal wave, pushing against his body, forcing him to his knees. A low rumble echoed through the ground, and the wind picked up around him. The trees in the distance began to sway violently, their roots cracking and breaking. David gasped, realizing that he had only begun to scratch the surface of what this relic could do. He closed his eyes tighter and focused. He couldn't let the power consume him. He had to control it. Slowly, the wind calmed, and the shaking stopped. The earth beneath him stilled. David stood up slowly, trembling. His body was exhausted, but his mind was clearer than ever. He had felt the Earth's power, and now he knew. The planet wasn't just a place, it was alive, and it could fight back. The awakening of the Earth's defenses. David spent the next few days experimenting with the relic. Each time, the power grew stronger. At first, he only managed to cause small tremors and minor winds, but as he practiced, the Earth seemed to respond more and more. He could feel it, deep in his bones. The planet was awakening. One afternoon, as he stood in an open field, he called upon the relic once more. This time, the ground beneath him began to tremble, and a low roar echoed in the distance. David turned his head to see the sky darkening. Storm clouds rolled in quickly, swirling like a massive vortex. Thunder cracked loudly overhead. The wind whipped around him, and the air grew thick with the scent of rain. David raised his arms, and the storm intensified. Lightning shot down from the sky, striking the ground near him with incredible force. The power of the earth was at his fingertips. David took a step back, his eyes wide with awe. The storm was alive, just like the planet itself. And with this power, he could fight back. Learning control. Over the next few weeks, David continued to train. He had no choice. Earth was on the brink of destruction, and the invaders were growing stronger. They were everywhere, their ships hovering above cities, their soldiers hunting down survivors. David knew that Earth's people couldn't survive for long without a plan. The relic, however, could change everything. But learning to control the relic was not easy. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a part of the planet itself. The more David tried to control it, the more he realized that he needed to understand Earth's rhythm, its heartbeat. Only then could he channel the power without losing himself to it. He began to study the forces of nature. He spent hours in the forest, listening to the rustling of the leaves. He walked along the rivers, feeling the current in his hands. He learned how storms formed, how the earth shifted, and how the power of nature could be used in harmony. It wasn't long before David started to understand how to connect with the earth on a deeper level. With each passing day, his control grew. He could now call upon the wind with a thought, summon rain at will, and even cause small earthquakes with the flick of his wrist. But that was just the beginning. The first test. One evening, as David practiced near a small village, he felt a strange tremor in the ground. At first, it was barely noticeable, but then it grew stronger. He glanced up to see an alien patrol ship descending from the sky. The invaders had found them. David knew he had no choice. The people of the village were defenseless. He had to act fast. He closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself, tapping into the power of the earth. The relic responded immediately, its energy surging through him like a flood. He focused on the ground beneath the alien ship, willing it to crack open. The ground rumbled beneath him, and before the aliens could react, the earth split open. A massive chasm formed beneath the ship, swallowing it whole. The alien craft crashed into the earth, its engines exploding in a flash of light. The ground shook violently, but the ship was gone. David stood frozen, watching the smoke rise into the sky. He had done it. The first test had been a success. He had used the Earth's power to fight back. The villagers, who had been hiding in fear, emerged cautiously from their homes. They stared in awe at David, who was still standing amidst the wreckage of the alien ship. David knew that this was just the beginning. Earth had shown its power, but the aliens wouldn't give up so easily. They would send more ships, more soldiers, and David would be ready. A warning to the invaders. The news of the alien patrol's destruction spread quickly. The survivors began to rally around David, seeing him as the key to their survival. They were inspired, realizing that Earth wasn't as weak as the aliens had thought. The planet was alive, and it was fighting back. David's training continued, but he knew that time was running out. The invaders wouldn't sit idle after losing one of their patrols. They would send more ships, more soldiers, and they would be looking for revenge. One night, as David stood overlooking the city, he felt the relic pulse in his hands. A strange feeling washed over him, something he hadn't felt before. The earth was angry, and it was ready to fight. David clenched his fists. He could feel the earth's anger, its rage against the invaders. The planet wasn't going to wait much longer. He knew what he had to do. He had awakened the earth's power. And now, it was time to unleash it. Conclusion. David had learned to harness the power of Earth, but the real test was still ahead. The invaders would not stop until they had destroyed everything. But David was no longer just a man. With the Earth's power at his command, he was ready to lead humanity's fight for survival. The relic had awakened the planet's hidden force, and with it, David would ensure that Earth would never again be seen as weak. The invaders had underestimated humanity, and now Earth's wrath would be unleashed. David stood in the center of the ancient cavern, his hands tightly gripping the relic that now hummed with a strange, unnatural energy. The glowing stone was warm to the touch, and he could feel its pulse reverberating deep within his bones. Earth had chosen him, or perhaps he had simply been in the right place at the right time. But now, the weight of this power was heavy upon him, and he realized that it was the last hope for humanity. For the first time since the alien invasion, David felt a flicker of hope. The aliens had thought Earth was weak, defenseless, and ripe for the taking. They had invaded, killed millions, and left chaos in their wake. But what the invaders didn't know was that Earth was not just a planet. It was a living, breathing entity with hidden powers far beyond anything they had ever encountered. David knew that this relic was part of that hidden power. The problem was, he didn't understand how to use it. The relic was ancient, older than any civilization, and its secrets were lost to time. But David had no choice. He had to learn how to awaken the Earth's power before it was too late. The first connection. David closed his eyes, focusing on the relic. He felt its power coursing through his fingertips, and for a brief moment, he thought he heard a low rumble beneath the ground. He stood still, listening carefully, but it was gone. A soft breeze swirled around him, and he could feel the relic humming louder, urging him to connect. He took a deep breath and concentrated again. This time, he reached out, not with his hands, but with his mind. He focused on the earth beneath his feet, imagining the layers of rock and soil, the molten core deep within the planet's heart. The relic pulsed in his hand, as though it recognized his intent, and David's connection to the earth deepened. The ground trembled slightly. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it was there. David's heart raced. He had felt it. The earth had responded. The power unleashed. The more David focused, the stronger the tremors became. The earth seemed to be waking up, like a giant stirring from a long sleep. Suddenly, with a loud crack, the ground beneath him split open. David stumbled back in shock, but the relic's glow intensified, stabilizing the earth around him. The sky above darkened, clouds forming at an alarming speed. Wind picked up around him, whipping the trees nearby into a frenzy. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning flashed across the sky. It was as if the entire planet was reacting to the power within the relic. David's pulse quickened. He could feel it now. He was not alone. The earth was alive, and it was responding to him. The relic had awakened something deep within the planet, a force that no alien invader could hope to understand. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but the relic seemed to guide him. He reached out with his mind again, and the storm intensified. Wind howled through the trees, lightning crackled violently above, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. David gasped, realizing he had just tapped into something much larger than himself. The first test. As David struggled to maintain control, he heard a distant sound. It was faint at first, but it quickly grew louder. It was the unmistakable hum of alien technology. David's heart skipped a beat. The invaders had found him. The sky overhead darkened further, and a flash of green light filled the sky. An alien patrol ship descended slowly, its engines humming as it hovered over the landscape. The ship was massive, easily the size of a city block, and it seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. It was looking for him. David didn't hesitate. He had learned just enough to know that the Earth's power could be used as a weapon. He had to act quickly. With a steady breath, David reached out once more, feeling the energy of the Earth flowing into him. He focused on the ground beneath the alien ship, willing it to break apart. For a brief moment, nothing happened, but then the Earth responded. The ground shook violently as the alien ship's massive engines sputtered and failed. The ship wobbled in the air, and then, with a deafening crash, it fell from the sky. It smashed into the earth with an explosive force, sending debris flying in all directions. David stood in the center of the chaos, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had done it. He had used the power of the earth to bring down an alien ship. But the victory was bittersweet. The alien invaders had learned of Earth's potential, and they wouldn't be pleased. The aftermath. As the dust settled, David stood among the wreckage of the alien craft. His heart pounded in his chest, but he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. The alien ship, once a symbol of their power, now lay in ruins. But this was only a small victory in the grand scheme of things. David knew that the aliens would retaliate. This was just the beginning. The power of the relic had given him a glimpse of what Earth was capable of, but there was still much to learn. He had awakened the Earth's power, but controlling it would be the real challenge. He walked toward the wreckage of the ship, his thoughts racing. He had to gather the survivors, unite them, and prepare for the next stage of the fight. Earth had shown its strength, but the invaders would not go down without a fight, and David would be ready for them. A glimmer of hope. Back at the survivors' camp, news of the alien ship's destruction spread quickly. The people were shocked, but they were also filled with a sense of hope. For the first time in weeks, they saw a glimmer of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, Earth wasn't helpless after all. David knew that this small victory would inspire the survivors to fight back. But there was still much to do. The invaders were ruthless, and they would come again, stronger and more determined. Earth had to be ready. David stood at the edge of the camp, looking out at the horizon. The power of the relic was now a part of him, and he could feel it stirring, waiting for the moment when it would be needed again. The fight for Earth had only just begun, and David was ready to lead the charge. The Earth had awakened, and with it, a new hope had been born. But the true test was yet to come. David stood at the edge of the ruined alien ship, his heart still pounding in his chest. The power of the Earth's relic surged inside him, pulsing like a second heartbeat. He could feel the weight of it, the raw energy that had caused the Earth to crack open and the skies to rage with thunder and lightning. But even though the first test had been a success, a sinking feeling lingered in the pit of his stomach. The invaders would not give up so easily. Behind him, the survivors were gathering, eyes wide with disbelief and awe. They had witnessed the unimaginable. A human, one of them, had just brought down an alien warship. For the first time since the invasion, they had hope. But David knew this victory was fleeting. The aliens were far from defeated, and they would retaliate. He couldn't afford to relax, not even for a moment. Earth was alive with power, but so were the aliens. The ship that had crashed was only one of many, and they would send more, perhaps even stronger, with deadlier weapons. David had to prepare the people for what was to come. The aliens' response. It didn't take long for the invaders to strike back. A few days after the crash, David received word from a scout. Several alien ships had appeared in the skies, hovering ominously over the remaining human settlements. These ships were unlike the one David had destroyed. They were larger, more advanced, with weapons that looked capable of obliterating entire cities. David gathered the survivors, including those who had fled from other towns, and began to strategize. His connection to the Earth's power had given him a fighting chance, but he couldn't rely on it alone. The aliens would soon overwhelm them with sheer numbers. "We can't wait for them to come to us," David said, addressing the survivors in a calm but firm voice. "We have to take the fight to them." A murmur of uncertainty ran through the crowd. People were scared. They had seen the devastation that the aliens had caused, and most believed there was no way to fight back. David raised his hand, silencing the murmurs. "We don't have to fight them in their way. We'll use the Earth's power, our planet's power, to turn the tables." He glanced at the relic still held tightly in his hands, its faint glow casting shadows in the dim light. "The relic is just the beginning," he continued. "The Earth has more power than we realize, and I'm going to awaken it, all of it." Learning to control the Earth's fury, David spent the next few days learning more about the relic, pushing himself to understand its limits. The more he connected with the Earth's energy, the more he realized it was not just about raw power. It was about harmony. The Earth was a living, breathing organism, and David's connection to it was the key to unlocking its full potential. But controlling the Earth's wrath was no easy task. As he tried to tap deeper into the planet's force, he found that it could easily overwhelm him. The power was immense, but it was also unpredictable. Sometimes he could barely contain it. At other times, the energy would surge through him uncontrollably, causing tremors or violent winds. He practiced for hours each day, focusing on the connection between the relic and the planet. Slowly, he began to understand how to control it, how to use the Earth's force in small, precise ways. But he also knew that when the time came, he would need to unleash everything the Earth had to offer. The time for small victories was over. Preparing for war, the survivors had begun to build makeshift defenses, walls of stone, traps, and barricades. But David knew they wouldn't be enough. The aliens had advanced weapons, shields, and armor that could tear through anything they threw at them. Their ships were capable of firing energy blasts strong enough to level entire cities, and they could attack from the air without mercy. But David also knew that the Earth had its own defenses. The power of the storms, the fury of the oceans, the strength of the mountains, all of these forces were at his command now. And with the relic, he could channel that power into something far more devastating than any alien weapon. He walked to the center of the survivors' camp, his eyes scanning the horizon. The invaders were coming, and time was running out. There was no more hiding, no more waiting for help. This was Earth's battle, humanity's battle. "We will fight," David said, his voice firm. "But not just with weapons. We will fight with the earth. The storms, the rivers, the land itself, they will be our allies." The survivors nodded, determination growing in their eyes. They had seen what the earth was capable of, and they were ready to stand with David. David's heart swelled with pride. These people, these survivors, were no longer afraid. They had seen the power of the earth, and they believed in it. They believed in him. But David knew that belief wasn't enough. They needed to prepare, to train, to understand how to use the power of the earth to their advantage. He couldn't do this alone, and they couldn't afford to make mistakes. The battle begins. It wasn't long before the alien ships arrived. The sky darkened with their presence, and the survivors could see them on the horizon. Massive, menacing vessels descending from the clouds, their weapons already primed. David stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes focused on the incoming ships. His hand tightened around the relic. The time had come. Earth's wrath would be unleashed. He stepped forward, calling upon the Earth's power. He reached deep into the planet, tapping into its core, feeling the vast, unstoppable force within. The relic pulsed with energy, and David felt the ground beneath him tremble as the earth began to respond. He raised his hands, and the earth trembled with him. The first alien ship fired a blast toward the survivors, but David was ready. He thrust his hands toward the sky, and the winds roared to life. A storm formed out of nowhere, and the blast of energy from the alien ship was swallowed by a wave of wind and lightning. The air crackled with energy, and the ground below shook violently as the storm intensified. David's eyes were locked on the ships, his mind focused on the earth's power. He raised his arms higher, and the earth itself responded. Massive cracks formed in the ground beneath the alien vessels, and giant stone pillars erupted from the earth, blocking their path. The aliens fired again, but their weapons were useless against the sheer force of the earth's wrath. The ships began to tremble, their hulls groaning under the pressure. David's heart raced. He had never used so much power before, but it was working. The earth was fighting back. Conclusion. The tide turns. The battle was far from over, but David could feel it. The tide was turning. The earth's power was vast, untamable, and unlike anything the invaders had ever faced. The relic had awakened something deep within the planet, and with it, David knew that Earth would never bow to the invaders again. As the alien ships began to falter, David called upon the last of the Earth's fury. The sky split open with a thunderous roar, and massive waves surged from the ocean, crashing into the alien forces. The Earth was unleashing everything it had. David's heart surged with pride. The battle had begun, and Earth was ready to fight back. David stood at the heart of the battlefield, his eyes locked onto the alien invaders who had dared to strike at Earth again. The massive ships hovered above the survivors' camp, their engines roaring like beasts preparing to feast. The air hummed with tension, the sky darkened with the threat of destruction, and the earth beneath him seemed to pulse with energy. He could feel it. The earth was ready to fight back. It had shown its power before, but now David had learned to command it. He had unlocked more of its potential, and the time had come to use everything it had to offer. The aliens had underestimated Earth. They thought it was weak, a planet ripe for invasion. Now, they would learn just how wrong they were. David raised his hands, calling upon the power of the earth. He could hear the deep rumbling beneath his feet as the planet stirred in response. He knew that with the relic in his grasp, he had tapped into something far older and more powerful than anything the aliens could imagine. The first of the alien ships fired its weapons, energy blasts searing through the air. But David was ready. He thrust his hand forward, and the ground beneath him responded. A massive wall of stone rose from the earth, absorbing the blasts and pushing the alien firepower back. The alien ships recoiled, their weapons sputtering as they tried to regain control. But David wasn't finished. With a fierce roar, he called upon the storm. Lightning crackled in the air, arcing between the ships and the ground. The wind howled, a torrent of fury as the storm grew. David could feel the electricity charge through his body, the power of the earth filling him, pushing him forward. The aliens fired again, but this time, they weren't prepared for the sheer force of Earth's wrath. The air was alive with the sound of thunder, and the storm rage, a wall of wind, and lightning that consumed the invaders' attacks. David focused, pouring more energy into the Earth's power. The storm intensified, lightning striking the alien ships with deadly precision. One of the vessels cracked, sparks flying as it plummeted from the sky, crashing into the ground below. The survivors cheered, their voices rising in triumphant unison, but David knew this battle was far from over. The invaders were not so easily defeated. The alien ships regrouped, their weapons charging again as they prepared for a final assault. David could see their resolve in the cold, unfeeling eyes of their ships. They had seen what Earth was capable of, but they still believed they could crush humanity. They were wrong. David raised his hand once more, and the Earth answered. He called upon the oceans, the seas that surrounded the planet, the very water that made Earth unique. He focused, his mind reaching out to the waters, the rivers, the lakes that covered the planet's surface. The relic pulsed in his hand, and the ocean began to respond. The ground shook as the water surged upward, a massive wave forming on the horizon. The Earth was alive, and its fury was unleashed. The water rose higher and higher, a wall of liquid power that reached toward the heavens. The alien ships fired, but their weapons had no effect on the wave. It crashed down on them, sweeping the invaders off course. One by one, the ships faltered, their engines sputtering as they were consumed by the massive wave. David could feel the Earth's energy surging through him, guiding his every move. The relic in his hand glowed brighter than ever, its energy coursing through his veins like fire. He had connected with Earth in a way that no human had ever done before. The planet's power was now his, and he wielded it with unrelenting force. The aliens who had thought they could conquer Earth with ease were beginning to realize just how wrong they had been. The tides of war. With the alien fleet in disarray, the survivors seized the opportunity. They attacked with everything they had, picking up weapons, using the knowledge David had shared about Earth's power, and pushing back against the invaders. The storm raged overhead, the Earth's fury continuing to blindside the enemy. David fought alongside the survivors, no longer just a symbol of resistance, but a true leader, guiding them with the power he had learned to command. His every movement was guided by the Earth itself, and as the battle intensified, so did the connection between David and the planet. But despite their losses, the aliens refused to surrender. More ships arrived, larger, more dangerous, their weapons capable of mass destruction. The invaders had learned from their previous encounters with Earth. This time, they brought reinforcements, hoping to break through the planet's defenses. David's heart pounded as he saw the alien ships descend from the sky. The survivors around him looked to him for guidance, for hope. They knew they had come far, but the true test of Earth's power was still ahead. He raised his hand once more, calling upon the full force of the Earth. The relic in his grip thrummed with energy, and David felt a surge of power unlike anything he had ever experienced before. The Earth responded, the ground trembling beneath him as cracks began to form along the surface. The alien ships prepared to attack, their weapons aimed at the heart of the camp. But David was faster. With a shout, he slammed his fist into the ground, and the Earth roared in response. Massive spikes of rock shot up from the ground, piercing the underside of the alien ships. The ships exploded into a fiery mess of debris and metal as the Earth's power consumed them. The storm grew stronger, the winds howling as lightning arced through the sky, striking down any ships that dared to approach. David's eyes glowed with the power of the Earth, and for a moment, the world around him seemed to stand still. The invaders' forces were being shattered, torn apart by the wrath of the planet they had so foolishly sought to conquer. The final push. As the invaders' ships continued to fall from the sky, David knew they were close to breaking. The aliens had underestimated Earth's strength and humanity's will to survive. But even though the battle was turning in their favor, David knew this was not the end. The aliens were persistent, and their forces were vast. This fight would continue, but Earth had proven its strength, and so had its people. The relic pulsed one last time in his hand, and David felt the power of the Earth surge through him one final time. He pushed it all outward, willing the planet's energy to crush the last of the alien invaders. And with a final, deafening roar, the invaders' remaining ships exploded, sending shockwaves across the land. The battle was over. A new dawn for Earth. The survivors stood in awe as the last of the alien ships fell, their wreckage smoldering in the distance. The storm began to subside, the sky clearing to reveal the stars once again. Earth had triumphed, and humanity had proven that it would not bow to invaders. David stood at the center of the battlefield, the relic still glowing faintly in his hand. He felt a deep sense of relief, but he knew this victory was just the beginning. Earth's power had been unleashed, and now humanity would rebuild. The survivors gathered around him, their faces filled with gratitude and respect. They had fought alongside him, but it was the Earth's strength that had truly won the day. David looked out over the horizon, his heart swelling with pride. The war was over, but the fight to protect Earth was far from done. The invaders were gone, but others might come, and if they did, Earth's wrath would rise again. The skies were clear now, the battle's fiery aftermath slowly fading into the distance, but the victory felt distant to David. The energy of the Earth was still humming within him, every pulse echoing through his veins, like the beating heart of the planet itself. The storm had subsided, leaving behind a calm, almost eerie silence. The ground beneath his feet felt solid, firm, as if it too was resting after the chaos of war. David stared out across the battlefield, the wreckage of alien ships scattered across the land. The survivors moved about, gathering what they could, tending to the wounded and starting to rebuild. Their faces showed weariness, but there was a sense of relief too, a sense that they had truly won. Humanity had endured, and Earth had proven it would never fall to invaders. But David couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out of place. He had led them to victory, but the alien invaders had come with vast forces. How long would it take for another fleet to show up? How long before more of them sought to conquer Earth? He knew that no matter what, they could never be caught off guard again. The new dawn. As the survivors worked, David turned to the leader of the resistance, a woman named Mara. Her face was etched with exhaustion, but there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't dimmed, even after everything they had endured. "David," she said quietly, walking toward him, "we've won, but we've lost so much. So many lives. What now?" David looked at her, his expression solemn. "We rebuild, we fortify, and we stay vigilant. The Earth has given us power, but we can't let our guard down. The universe is vast, and we've just scratched the surface of what's out there." Mara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. It was not enough to have won this battle. There was still so much to do, so much to prepare for. They needed to ensure Earth would never again be vulnerable. David had a new mission now, to ensure that humanity would never be unprepared again. The power of the Earth was no longer a secret, and humanity had unlocked its potential. But that power had to be used wisely. They couldn't afford to make the same mistakes as before. A new weapon. David had the power to command the Earth. He had seen its wrath. But it wasn't just about destruction. It was about balance, about learning to live in harmony with the planet, while also using its power to protect humanity from any future threats. The Earth could destroy, yes, but it could also heal, create, and sustain. And that was the true strength of humanity's connection to it. David knew that humanity needed to understand the Earth's power in its entirety. It couldn't just be used as a weapon. It had to be a shield, a guardian, a way to grow and evolve alongside the planet. not just a force to wield when danger approached. Mara and the other leaders gathered as David shared his vision for the future. He spoke of a new world, one where humanity worked with the earth, learning from it, tapping into its ancient wisdom, and preparing for the unknown. "The earth has shown us its power," David said, his voice filled with resolve. "But now it's up to us to use it wisely. We've seen what happens when we fight, but we also need to learn what happens when we nurture." There were murmurs of agreement, but also skepticism. It would take time to rebuild trust, to trust the earth, and to trust each other again. But David had learned that humanity's strength wasn't just in its ability to fight. It was in its resilience, its capacity to grow, and its will to protect what was most important: the rebuilding. Over the following weeks, humanity began to rebuild. The survivors didn't just focus on restoring what had been lost. They focused on creating something better. They strengthened the defenses, not only against alien invaders, but against natural disasters, against any force that could threaten their way of life. They built sustainable cities powered by the Earth's energy, a balance of technology and nature. The Earth's power flowed through their veins, and they harnessed it to heal the land, to restore forests, to cleanse the oceans, and to strengthen the very fabric of their world. David traveled across the planet, meeting with leaders from every corner of the globe. He shared his knowledge of the Earth's power, and they worked together to ensure that humanity was no longer divided, no longer weak. They had learned that together they could tap into the potential of the Earth to create something stronger. But even as they celebrated their newfound strength, David remained ever vigilant. The Earth had shown them mercy, but that didn't mean the universe would. There were still threats out there, in the far reaches of space, in the dark corners of the cosmos where the invaders had come from. David knew they could never let their guard down. A lasting legacy. David stood on a high hill one quiet evening, looking over the thriving city below. The lights from the new energy sources lit up the sky, and the fields around the city were lush and green, the earth alive and flourishing in a way it hadn't in centuries. Humanity had changed, but it had also grown stronger. The earth had been their teacher, and now they were its protectors. He thought back to that moment when the aliens had first attacked. He had stood there, facing their superior forces, knowing that the only way to survive was to use the Earth's power. And now, humanity was not only surviving, it was thriving. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of the earth. The storm had passed, but David knew that the peace they had fought for wasn't something they could take for granted. It was a fragile thing, built on trust, unity, and the strength to protect their home. David's heart swelled with pride. He had helped lead them to victory, but it wasn't just his strength that had made the difference. It was humanity's resilience, its ability to adapt, to learn, and to never give up. As he turned away from the hill, he smiled. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a force, a protector, and humanity's greatest ally. And as long as they stood together, Earth would continue to fight with them, always. The end, or the beginning. As the years passed, the peace endured. Earth's power was fully understood and respected, but its use was always tempered with wisdom. The invaders had learned their lesson, and they no longer sought to conquer humanity. But David knew the galaxy was vast, and there would always be new challenges, new threats. But humanity, united with the Earth, was ready, and together they would face whatever came next. The Earth had shown its mercy and its wrath. Now it would show its strength for the last time to those who would dare challenge it.